Hey folks, welcome back. Trying to do these shorter style videos. I actually sat and I watched the full event from start to finish, and I thought I'd just chat about my experience. Now, the reason I'm doing this is primarily one, because you know me, I sort of like to jab fun at esports call outs, all tongue in cheek, of course, and you know I don't like escalation and I prefer the older style execution and stuff like that. Basically, the first day and a half I streamed and I did a sort of live watch along. I'll go into it open minded and I'll just judge on what I see. Would I rewatch it? Would I watch it again? Would I recommend it? Now, the reason I'm making the video is because recently I haven't been enjoying the game as much. I don't think that's any surprise. Viewership across the board has dropped, which, if I'm being honest, it doesn't really affect me in the way it affects others, because obviously I don't make any money. I'm not like a massive YouTuber off ads or anything like that, so that doesn't work for me. By the way, new content goal has just started. But yeah, as long as if like people chip in that way, the lower view count doesn't affect me, which has pluses and negatives, obviously. But that's by the by. So the game itself has been feeling a little bit dead to me. I've been loading in and seeing empty lobbies and 30-minute wait queues and 70-minute execution timers, and just all around the board it's not been that enjoyable. I've tried to remain fun and positive, and actually this sort of month on stream has been one of my best ever on stream, if not the best ever. I've had the most interactions, the most follows, just basically overall activity on the Twitch channel has been really good. So for me, Gears has been really good to me, and obviously I want to repay that back to you and produce some enjoyable streams, but occasionally I haven't been doing that, and for that I apologise, because sometimes it's only natural that you amp yourself up to go on stream and then you end up playing the same people online. There's not that many lobbies. Lobbies take 20-30 minutes to get into, then you get into it and there's a quitter, and it does grate on you after a while. It shouldn't do. I should just be happy, cheery, but I'm a real person, and that's what I've built my channel on, and sometimes it does frustrate me. Chat about my experience. So the first thing I noted was there was a serious lack of build-up for the whole entire process. Going into it, to be honest, if I wasn't sort of embedded in the scene and I wasn't up to date and following certain people that were tweeting on flying out to Mexico looking for scrims, when's the games on, who's playing who, I wouldn't have really known that the games were on, which is a shame, because as much as we like to rag on the people that are quote pros and people like to rag on them and poke fun, we do need to understand a couple of things. Yeah, I do get where some people come from. They say like basically they're not really pros, they're just the only people that form a team, can be bothered to relentlessly practice, and can be bothered to pay their own way to an event. In that regard, yeah, I guess technically it's not a massively high level skill ceiling, and I'm not saying the people in the tournament aren't skilled, they definitely are, but what I'm saying is it's not the equivalent of, say, watching the Olympics, where you have to fight through rigid systems and the very best of the very best make their way to the top. Occasionally there are some subpar teams and players that are just there because obviously they've been in the scene a lot, they love the game, and they go out of their way to be a competitor, and that's great. Like, we shouldn't knock that. The fact that there are people still wanting to compete and going out of their way to compete, even though the scene is basically telling them, listen, like, you probably shouldn't compete, I think that's a great thing, and I wanted to support them and watch the event and tweet along and make a video on my YouTube channel and try and promote it in the best way I could. So overall, the promotion wasn't that great. The actual official Gears Twitter page didn't really get involved until basically mid-Sunday, from what I can recall. And also, basically, the Gears YouTube page, it did a live stream, but there was no build-up, there was no storylines, there was nothing. I'm pretty sure, you could have flown somebody out and they could have done some pre-game interviews. Hey, how have you been practicing? What are you looking forward to? What's your play styles? Is there any teams you're, scared of facing? Is there anything that surprised you about coming to Mexico? Is there anything that hasn't surprised you? Get some storylines. Oh, this is X player from the age of 12. He's always dreamt to been a pro. Now he's been competing on game battles. He's finally made it, and here he is in his first tournament. and he's a slayer, and he's a support player. So keep an eye out for this player. He's a support player. He's going to be spotting, assisting. I'm sure they could have built up some storylines which could have got some people hooked in. So I'm sure there were storylines, but for me personally, as an outsider, I didn't really find them, and I didn't find it to be heavily advertised. I sort of stumbled my way into it. Once I stumbled my way into it, I was honestly greeted with a game mode that I didn't personally understand. I know people will laugh at that and say it's escalation, it's not difficult, but if you've never watched the game mode and never played it, unfortunately I can't play it because there's no players. And I didn't play Gears 4 because it didn't work on my PC. So for me, going into it, I didn't really understand anything. The commentators at the beginning of the round did what felt like a 10-second intro of the game as like, okay, if there's some casuals here, you can triple cap, you can eliminate, off we go. And I sort of got it, but I didn't really get it enough to really enjoy the game at first. So personally, if you don't know, there are some streams that they're called beginner streams in Dota, and they're for new players, and they take everything a lot slower. Obviously, it's like a replay, and they're in the game, so they can pause it and chat about different things. Like, oh, he's now placed a smoke grenade down, and then they'll pause it and they'll chat about the tree upgrades. Okay, the smoke grenade can now become a flash, which can become, I don't know, a retro lancer or something, and that process is explained a bit better. So for the average Joe, it was very confusing as to what was going on. Eventually, after watching some games, I sort of understood the game mode. You eliminate people, you can triple cap, and then I understood the lives last. So the lives were sort of an economy point. Basically, at midway, your lives reset. So the last round was pretty much hectic because your lives are going to reset, and then the game picked up again in a different pace in the second half. And it took a while to get into it, just because of purely lack of understanding, which I think they could have done a bit better. The Gears client could have pointed people in. When you signed into Gears of War, it should have had a pop-up and said, Mexico event is on, watch now. It should have said, that basically there's a massive event going on, go and watch it. The Twitter account should have been going, the YouTube account should have been producing videos, and all of that stuff. Just as well doing like beginner guides like Escalation, because I actually went to YouTube to watch Escalation, and there was a video explaining how Escalation worked, but the video was outdated because it's now, you can't place certain weapons on certain home hills, and the round durations change, and there's been a few tweaks. So it would have been nice to get a proper update in video format and then introduce the game via social media properly. So the second problem I had was it was very difficult to watch from a spectator standpoint because the camera constantly changed. Gears is now a fast-paced movement system, bright red omen, flashbangs, and spectating from a player's point of view was pretty jarring, and honestly at some points it might sound daft. It almost gave me motion sickness, which people will laugh at, but there was a tremendous amount of movement and swapping back and forth between players, and I struggled to enjoy it. I was not understanding the game mode. I was really struggling to understand the story in the game. What I mean is I'd be spectating somebody, he'd be taking a 1v1, it would then suddenly cut, it would jump to somebody else, it would cut back, and I was just jumping everywhere. And they weren't using the fixed cameras. There was occasional moments where there was a fight on Asylum, which is the train map, and the sniper toll bit, and there was a big team fight broke out, and they used a steady camera, and the camera panned, and it just stayed looking at basically the sniper hill, and the action was in third person. There was no first person POVs, and the action was stationary, and I felt like I understood the fight clearer. I'd have liked to have seen them use the stationary cams more. On Sunday and towards the end, maybe I was getting more used to watching Gears and more used to the game mode, but I found that the production value was a bit better. I found that there was less flicking between people. We stayed on board certain people for a bit longer, but occasionally, again, it jumped from player to player way too much and really broke up the action, and the use of basically stationary cameras wasn't good enough in my eyes. So that's all said and done. Eventually I got used to it, but I can definitely see why a new player would be turned off. It was very difficult for somebody that's watched a lot of Gears like myself, that understands everything pretty much about Gears apart from escalation. It took me basically a day and a half to understand what was going on. Now, overall, the actual games I really enjoyed. I randomly picked the Pittsburgh Knights. I said, like, I'll pick a team, I'll support them, and then, you know, if they do well, that's great. I've got something to watch, because I think it's more interesting to watch something if you randomly support somebody. So, you know, I did that, and I picked the Pittsburgh Knights, and they went all the way to the final. I won't tell you what the final is in case you're going to watch it, but they went all the way to the final. And I really enjoyed the grit and determination they showed. I will say I did wince a lot. There was like mid-round humping. There was teams that were one game down and a map and like 3 rounds down that would get it down and start humping. There was bits where there was a guy in training grounds that died, their entire team humping, coach screaming. I mean, I get it. There's adrenaline flowing, you shit talking, and it was all in game. Trust me, that like afterwards there was respect and shaking hands and all that good stuff. So it does stay in game. It doesn't spill over. I'm not saying that, but for me personally, I just was like, oh, do we need that? Like, I'm so over that. Maybe that's just a personal thing. I know people love that, but for me, I was kind of like over it. Overall, again, I found Escalation to be a really good game mode once I got used to it. I found it to be really fun to watch. The managing of lives was interesting. The weapon placements were interesting. The team shotting, the rotations, the flanks, the breaks, all very, very interesting to me. In fact, they made it so interesting that I actually tried to play Escalation scrims today, but I didn't manage to find a game. So overall, I will say that the game mode is actually a really good game mode. I just think it's very difficult to play online because you need 5 people communicating for it to be that fun, all that clean. You know, if you're taking up positions and you're like, okay, they're breaking for the home hill and you want your team to rotate, that's not really going to happen in solo queue or duo queue or really public lobbies, because it's just not, is it? So I think Escalation was a fantastic game mode. I've changed my mind on it. I think it did really well. I think there was some brilliant plays. And just basically, it was very difficult from a spectator. I think it's a great game mode. It's probably really fun to play. But from a spectator standpoint, I don't think it's a spectator game. Maybe that's camera work they need to work on. Maybe it's something else. I'd personally love to see Guardian, King of the Hill execution. I don't think it's a great spectator sport. I think it's maybe hindered by camera angles or something. And the game mode itself is pretty confusing, I will admit. Even when playing it today, I found it difficult to keep track of who's alive on my own team. Should I respawn? Should I not? There was no UI for me. That might come with practice, of course. So, you know, I think the game mode's good. I just don't think it's an esport game mode to watch in its current form. I'm not saying it can't be. I'm saying in its current form, I did struggle with it. Again, I think Gears is great when it has all of the different game modes. I'd like to see, rather than Escalation Training Grounds into Escalation Bunker, I'd love to see, okay, this team picked Escalation on Training Grounds, now they're playing King of the Hill on Bunker, or they're playing Guardian on Bunker. I think that would get the casuals way more involved because they understand that game and they play that game and they can relate to it. Every big esports that I can think of, the casual player base plays the same game as the pros. That way the casuals can go, wow, look at what he does in this game mode, or she does, or wow, look at what they do as a team on this map and in this particular setup. They actually take the leader down bottom and protect him there, etc. When you watch Escalation, there was no relation from me to them. I couldn't see what I typically do or what angle I typically get because I don't play that game mode, unfortunately. So there was a disconnect there, which I think could be solved through either promoting the game in the client so more people play Escalation, making it easy to play as a solo player, or just generally playing other game modes. Again, I won't bore you to death with quality of games. I thought all the players played really well. There was good team fights. Occasionally there was some really like what I would call casual esports, in the sense of like you could just tell like they're good players but they're not on the same level as say a League of Legends or Dota team with a specific tactic nailed in. It was more like here's 5 good players with a coach trying their very best to communicate, rather than super high level stuff which I'm used to watching, but it was still really good. You know, like occasionally the guy would pick up the sniper and instantly burn through 4 bullets pop shotting, and I'm thinking, but the sniper's like the pressure creator. You should probably sit back, don't even shoot the thing, just keep it glinting so it forces other people's to keep their heads down. You know, I think there was some stuff that I thought, you know, are they really professionals or are they just good players that have grouped up and paid to fly? I know that's been a little bit unfair, but I'm just saying what I saw as a casual player. Obviously, I'm not a pro. I'm not a fantastic player anymore. But I did find that occasionally. Now, as far as maps, games, all that stuff went, good shotgun fights. I found there to be a lot of shotgun fights, mostly 2-shot downs, mostly a bit of support fire, you know, backing off to 2v1s, but it's competitive, and I understand that's going to happen. A lot less rifling than I predicted. I thought there was going to be so much more rifling, but there wasn't a lot more shotgun gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, I'll wrap it up and I'll just say, as a spectator, I found that it was annoying that the sniper was pretty much irrelevant because you can't active down people, because people move so fast and you're only ever really going to get a standstill. I found that the sniper really wasn't good, never really picked up. There was like one game Mental got a standstill on Vaskar. Wasn't really good. I think you could have an active down on the sniper. People will hate me for that, but I think it needs a bit of presence and power in the gun. The boom shot having 1 bullet, nobody ever really built up to a boom shot. It was all insins and it was all flashes, which got a bit boring after a while, and it was all drop shot. The drop shot to me, I'm not saying they're not bad. I'm not saying they're not bad shots because they were obviously active. Reactive good shots with the drop shot, but it felt like pretty much, unless it was a huge choke, the pros were getting 1 to 2 kills every single drop shot, and it was all about the drop shot. So, you know, maybe that could be looked at. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I just thought I'd basically sum up what I thought, really.